Today we're at Dunkeswell Aerodrome to start off the new series, Student Spotlight, the series that looks at students at the University of Exeter and we see what they do outside of their degrees. Starting off, we'll be looking at David. He's a private pilot and he'll be taking us on a flight to Perranporth, Cornwall. Let's go meet him.
Hi, right. My name is David Cooper. I'm going into my second year of engineering and management, and I am a private pilot.
First of all, David showed me his licence and then the flight plan for the day. He said that private pilots have to abide with certain minima, which is uncontrolled airspace, clear of cloud and inside of the surface with 5 or more kilometres of visibility in order to fly visually. Even though we're unsure of whether we will be able to fly due to the weather conditions, we decided to be prepared and check out the aircraft. While I was taking photos of the Piper Warrior 3 PA28161, David was busy checking the anti-collision light, the navigation light and the landing lights were all in working condition, and at the same time he checks the pitot heat and stall warner. Then he took a fuel sample. This helps ensure that there is no fuel contamination such as water. Here you can see that there is no water in the fuel tanks. The water will be separate from the fuel if there is contamination. Then he checks the hinges and the condition of the flap. With the tyres, he has to check that all nuts and bolts are attached. There is sufficient pressure, there is no creep in the tyre indicated by the red line, hydraulic lines aren't leaking and the discs and brake pads are in good condition. Next, David checks the oil. He does this by opening the engine cowling. Inside there is a 4-cylinder Lycoming engine. There is a maximum oil capacity of 8 US quarts. After this, he checks the propeller and the engine compartment. Important checks include the static vent, the pitot vent, and drains are clear of any objects because if blocked may show inaccurate indications in the plane's instruments. Once inside, David decided to delay the time of departure after looking at the Met Office, METARs and TAFs. Thankfully though, the weather cleared up and so David taxied the plane to the fuel pump. Once fueled up, we did our pre-flight checks and taxied to do our power checks. After completion, we told the radio we were entering and backtracking runway 04. As you can see, I was very excited and then we lined up, set full power and took off. We flew over Credington, Bovey Tracy, Ivy Bridge, Liscard and St Austell, for which we arrived in Perranporth. David talked to Dunkeswell Radio, Exeter Radar, Plymouth Military, Newquay Radar and Perranporth Radio. We also flew over the Eden project, which was very cool to see. David then got information from Perranporth stating the runway, traffic and details of the airport, for which he made an informed decision for how to join the circuit. we landed. It was an amazing experience to fly over the sea and then land right onto the coast. Then we took in the views of Perranporth and other pilots landing. But before we knew it, it was time for David to do his checks again and set off. It was incredible to take in the views of the southwest coast on the way back to Dunkeswell. And here you can see David landing after a successful flight. So now we're joined back in studio with David, so let's get started on some questions about flying and your experience with it. So how long have you been flying for now? What age did you start?
So I started at 14, and then since then it's just maybe every month or so, but trying to do every month, monthly.
So where do you learn?
At Dunkeswell Aerodrome, just past Exeter.
So what would you say is your most important part of the flying process?
Definitely the planning is a big part of it. There's the mass and balance sheets, then the navigation part of it and maps, and from that it's derived into wind correction, and then magnetic track, and then timing, fuel planning. All of that, it goes into one big thing, and whether it's on the day or it's before, then very important. And then the flying as well is but it's easier to learn in the plane, and then everything else you have to learn is part of it.
So on the actual day of the flight, what are your steps that you go through?
Before, or however long before, I would have done the mass and balance sheets, and then put all of the maps in place, just so we know where we're going. And then on the day, we'd have gone on to the Met Office and found out the METARs and the TAFs for the day, so meteorological conditions at that period of time, and they update every half an hour. And then the TAFs are for later on in the day or the day after. So we'll take those wind recordings from the Met Office, and we'll plan to correct for those. So if I'm on a track of east and the wind is coming from the north, then I'd have to fly a bit into the wind, so it would be more north, east sort of thing.
Nice. And so what training did you have to go through to get to the point that you're at now?
So I've got my private pilot's license and my night rating, and I'm currently doing my instrument rating to fly through clouds and everything. But for my private pilot's license, I had to do 9 theoretical exams, then a radio telephony exam, and I had to do a check ride. So that involves 45 hours of flying, and then I think 10 of that is solo.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and then my night hours were 5 hours with it was 0.8 without an instructor doing landings.
Very cool. And so what's next?
So I'm going to finish this instrument rating restricted. So only valid in the UK, and the Isle of Man, and the Channel Islands. So you can't fly anywhere with it in Europe or anywhere else around the world, just UK. But it's a good step towards that final goal of getting my full instrument rating.
And so how would you find balancing this hobby with your uni degree, which is engineering and management?
Absolutely. Very tough. The degree is extremely time consuming, and then so is flying. So it's all part of one big planning process and trying to plan the time to do everything. So generally, I'll fly on weekends, but that involves during the week planning for that flight and then doing all the stuff for the degree as well.
But you managed to do it. So
Oh,
there
absolutely.
we go. And so what would you say is your favourite airport or airfield to fly to, or dream location?
So we've flown to Perranporth, but I've flown to Kemble, which was incredible during my solo cross countries and my cross countries for my private pilot's license. We went to Kemble, and there's station there. There's 747s, and there's a cafe. So
Perfect. You
it's
can eat as
incredible.
well there.
Definitely.
And so what would you say motivates you with flying?
Generally, I think it's the thrill of it. I think I've been flying for so long now that every time I go flying afterwards, I don't think I've felt anything like it. It's completely different. As soon as those wheels leave the ground, it's different. I can't really describe.
Yeah. Well, as a passenger, I was just like, I didn't stop smiling. I just couldn't believe it. Like, you can't quite understand it until you're there, I think.
I know, but the engineering that's gone into it
Yeah.
all over the years, like the plane that we flew, Golf Kilo Romeo, was a I think 1990s plane, but then the Cessnas that I've flown before are like 1970s.
Very cool. So how do people react when you tell them that you're a private pilot?
Mixed reactions. Some are like kind of in shock, don't really understand what's going on. And then some people, my favourite definitely is if someone else is a private pilot. Instantly you have this connection and you're talking and you can relate to someone in that way. It's quite cool.
Nice. And so to finish it off, what is your top flying tip?
My top flying tip is to plan. Definitely, to plan is the number one. I can't say that enough. Everything that goes into it on the day before it, and then when you're flying, none of it goes to plan. Everything you've planned for will change, but you have to adapt to that, and that's one of the best things about being a pilot, I would say.
And so you'd recommend flying to anyone?
100%. You have to go to Dunkersville Airdrome for your lessons. They're really good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
It's
very
really
much.
great
It was
having
really good.
you. And that was the first episode of Student Spotlight, episode 1. It was great. I really enjoyed it and can't wait for the next one. Thank you.
Cheers.